Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to CSLDallas on this fabulous Easter Sunday. I'm Dr. Petra, and we're happy to have you in the room, and we're happy to have those of you who are joining us online. So we have been going through the introduction of the science of mind, but given that it's Easter today and a big Christian holiday, I thought we would spend a little time on the metaphysical teachings of these fabulous stories. And since on Easter we celebrate the resurrection from the Christian tradition, and we celebrate spring from the ancient goddess traditions, which is how Easter got its name and got its position in the timeline of the year, I thought we might talk about that for a minute. Today. So as you may know, it took me a long time to memorize this. Easter is the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. The first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. And so that's why it moves around, because it doesn't have a particular date. It is in alignment with the spring. And the full moon. And both of these things help indicate to us and remind us that actually it's a much deeper time of celebration. The celebration of spring and the celebration of renewal and the celebration of rebirth. So in the Christian tradition, the story of the resurrection, many of you may or may not know this, it's actually not in every one of the Gospels. Neither is the story of the birth of Jesus, also is not in all of the Gospels. And the Gospel of Mark, which is considered the earliest Gospel, has neither the birth story nor the resurrection story in it. Person, if you're very interested in the teachings of Jesus and you really want to explore them, a person that I highly recommend is a gentleman named Marcus Borg, and he wrote a book called Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time. And it's really an extraordinary understanding of not only the stories and the teachings of Jesus, but also about our own spiritual maturity as we grow in our spiritual understanding of the kinds of stories that we hear or are exposed to as a child, as our spirituality develops, as we grow and mature, and we begin to take up the spiritual stories and the spiritual tradition that we were raised in, either take it up in a different way, or we find a spiritual tradition that speaks to us with who we have become and who we are as adults. So I highly recommend Marcus Borg's Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time. And in that book, he really focuses on the teachings of Jesus, not the teachings about Jesus, the teachings of Jesus, which is, of course, what we do in the science of mind. We're very interested in what Jesus is reported to have said, the healings and miracles he is reported to have done, and to ask ourselves, what is the example that he's trying to give us? What is he trying to show us? What is he trying to teach us? The birth story and the resurrection story actually were added later. And both of them have preceding stories from earlier traditions. So if we focus on the resurrection story, which in its nutshell is Jesus was crucified, died, was buried for 3 days, and then rose again from the dead, right? And so this story is actually significantly older than the Christian teaching. There are stories in the Persian tradition. There are stories in the Egyptian tradition. Isis, Osiris, and Horus have the same sort of storyline. And interestingly enough, at about the same time of the Egyptians The Hopis were telling the story of the corn god who came when the Hopis were dying in the famine, in a year over year famine. And the corn god came, and as a young man, as a young brave, and was very instrumental in the village, and ultimately said in the spring, "I will help you. You need to kill me, cut my body up, bury it for 3 days, and in 3 days I will rise again, and it will feed you." And of course, that's the story. What rose was maize, was their corn. And what rose out of that, and that's the story that they tell about how they got maize, how they got corn as one of their primary staple foods. And so there's something really powerful about this story that is repeated over and over and over again in different traditions. And Marcus Borg asks this question: what was it about this man that caused his followers to tell these kinds of stories about him? What was it about his presence, about the way in which he touched people when he spoke, that as the time went by, there was this desire to express his specialness, to express what was really amazing about being in his presence? And I think it's a fascinating way of taking a look at it. What was it about this person who appeared to have such an impact on his followers that they were inspired to tell these stories? Somebody who behaves like that, speaks like that, teaches like that, heals like that, must have had a miraculous birth. And we have those stories of miraculous births in almost every spiritual tradition. Lao Tzu is reported to have been born at 72 riding a bull. I think about his mother at that moment, right? But that's right. That is the story, and so so these are the things that help us understand, and they help us understand that when we're in a time period that is not so fundamentally fixated on what are the facts, as we have been since our scientific revolution, that there are truths that are revealed in powerful stories. And so the Native Americans will say, well, I don't know if these are facts. I don't know that it happened this way, but I know it's true. I don't know that it happened this way, but I know it's true, right? Because in these legends and myths, there's deep and profound spiritual recognition of life, of who we are, of how all of this works, right? That's why these stories last for so long. Again, I would recommend to you any work by Joseph Campbell, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, or any of his works on mythology. And he really explores how these stories capture really important things that we intuitively know, but find difficult to express. How do you talk about the eternality of an immortal soul, which is the truth of our being, when it looks like when people are dead, they're dead, right? When the physical facts or our experiences from an outer point of view makes it challenging to speak about the deep mystical experiences that we have of oneness, the intuitive knowing that we have about life and about the eternality of life. And our language, we try to parse it and analyze it, and the more we do, the more separation we bring into the discussion that we have. And so we tell stories. We tell stories. And it's only been in the last 400 years, 300 years, as I said, since the scientific revolution, that we require A, the stories to be factual, or B, that they're myths, therefore they don't mean anything, right? Because they're not factual. And so when we think about the story of the resurrection, right, here we have a person who said, when you see me, you see the Father. Not when you see the way that I pray, I will bring the Father to you. Not, oh, let me mediate between you and the Father because I'm so cool and special. No, when you see me, you see the Father. When you see me, you see that presence. You see that infinite life, right? And reminded us over and over and over again that that kingdom of heaven which we are seeking, where is it? It's within. And he didn't say, oh, it's within me. I'm sorry about you guys. And he didn't say, oh, it's within me, but if you worship me, then it'll be within you too, right? He said the kingdom of heaven is within, and it's within all of us. It's within you. And so locating that deep spiritual truth, so then we have the story of the crucifixion, right? So we can ask ourselves, what needs to be crucified? What in our own lives for us to recognize and experience the deep spiritual truth of who we are, what needs to be crucified? The shadow. What else? What needs to be crucified? You online, you can put it in the chat. Okay. Put it in and shout it out in here. What needs to be? Limiting beliefs. False ideas about who we are. Assumptions. Judgment. The need to be right. Oh, right? Our defensiveness, the ways in which we protect ourselves, right? It's astonishing how many times in the science of mind, Ernest Holmes uses the term abandonment. And we think of that psychologically as this terrible, horrible, awful thing. We've been abandoned by something. And over and over again in the science of mind, Ernest Holmes says we have to abandon ourselves into the love of the divine. We have to abandon ourselves into spiritual truth. What does that mean? We have to die. That part of us has to die that is forever protecting us, keeping us safe, keeping us secure. Essentially, our humanness, right? Because that's the part of us that is biologically driven, threat, safety, security. Do I have what I need? Am I okay? Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Do I have all my basic needs met? Do I have my needs of love and belonging met? These are the things that drive us. Do I have my need for recognition and being seen by others? Do I have these met? And these are all the needs that we have. And they're not necessarily bad and wrong. When we have a healthy ego, our ego helps us manage the world. It's what keeps us on time for appointments and caring about paying our bills and, doing a good job at work and being good parents or a good partner. I mean, that our ego is helping us manage from a mental and emotional point of view the space-time continuum, just as our body is helping us manage moving in this particular physical realm. The problem is we become fixated on the idea that this is the truth. This is the way that life works. And we get inside that box. And I love what Ram Dass says in his book, Journey to Awakening. He said, our ego is nothing more than a house in which we live. And we have forgotten to open the doors and windows. But our spiritual work opens the doors and windows and invites us out to the great unknown that is outside our house, the mystery of life itself that is outside our house. And all of our spiritual practices invite us to step out of that door. Not that the house is wrong. We need the house. We need to be able to manage our space-time continuum. But when it becomes closed and it becomes the only way in which we see life, then right? Then threat and security and safety and all of that become the driving factors. And we perhaps don't behave exactly as spiritually grounded or as aligned with our spiritual principles as we could be, right? Which ultimately then leads to inappropriate or hateful or even heinous ways of behaving, because we don't know any better, because we believe that we have to get things, right? And so what we have to crucify within ourselves and allow to be crucified are those false beliefs that say we have to get ours, we have to protect ourselves, we have to defend. God forbid anybody should discover that we're not perfect. All of those kinds of things. And we have to let it die. And I love the image of 3 days in the tomb. Sometimes I wish I could just put them in a jar and smother them, suffocate them, make them go away. And it doesn't happen like that. It is a process of dying and releasing and letting go and letting go and letting go and letting go, and over and over and over again doing that to the point where we realize that we've let go of as much of that as we can at the moment, and we discover that there's still something incredibly valuable left. We didn't die. We are, despite what our ego tells us, no, you're going to die if you do that, right? No, we discover actually we didn't die. But our spiritual self becomes more and more and more revealed. And interestingly enough, in the story, when the stone is rolled away in the story, who sees Jesus first? The women, right? The intuition, the intuitive, receptive part of us that can see spiritual truth without needing to analyze it, figure it out, right? And of course, the men, they needed proof, right? They needed proof, and can I see your wounds, and can I touch them, right? Factual proof. I need factual proof. And of course, that doesn't mean men and women, right? We all have those within us. We all have that intuitive, receptive nature, and we all have that nature that needs to analyze and know and figure out. And the spiritual revelation of the truth of our being comes to us intuitively first. It comes to the truth of who we are. That truth of who we are comes to that part of us that knows without knowing how it knows. That knows without facts, but through revelation, intuition, that those moments of opening where we experience things that we're not sure we know how to talk about or explain, right? And then we begin to explore and discover, well, how is this true? How is this possible? And we bring our more analytical side to it so that we can at least find some language for it, share it, talk about it, connect with others who have had this experience, right? We need language to be able to do that. And so the more analytical or rational side of us, the yang side of us, if you will, has to come to the forefront. So again, remember, this has really nothing to do with men and women. It really, I prefer the Eastern instead of feminine and masculine. I prefer the Eastern yin and yang, right? It has nothing to do with gender or any of that. It has everything to do with the ways in which we engage with the world. And so what an extraordinary thing. And then what are we told? The story goes on, the body of light, that Jesus reveals himself in the body of light. And other stories in the Judeo-Christian tradition has people who ascend as bodies of light. And of course, we know from our current growing understanding from quantum physics that everything is light. And the mystics for centuries and millennium have talked about seeing the light in people, right? Which is why, of course, the saints all have halos around them, and why in the Eastern representations, there's always light around the sage or the guru or the saint, because that's the truth of who we are, right? The truth of who we are is that we are the light made manifest. We are bodies of light that are cloaked in physicality and with an ego, so that you can actually differentiate us from the light that's shining, and we can actually engage in this beautiful expression called life. And so when we think about the resurrection, it's not so much a rebirth from something that wasn't before. It's a rebirth in terms of the remembering of who we really are, and the recognition that this is the truth of our being, which is why then it's the promise of eternality and immortal life, because that being of light is that aspect of us that goes on when we do in fact lay these bodies down. And we see that story told in so many beautiful and different ways. And the resurrection is exactly as beautiful and as important when we can see it as a representation of what it means to be a human being who absolutely understands and lives from the spiritual truth of who they are. Right? That's the revelation. So it seems valuable to spend a moment to ask ourselves, what do these stories mean for us? How can they illumine us, right? And to really recognize that, yeah, there are parts of us that do in fact need to die, and some of them we have to kill off. And that takes discipline and intentionality and a willingness to go through the darkness and the dark night of the soul. If I'm not that, who am I? If I'm not my trauma, and if I'm not my story, and if I'm not my false beliefs, if I'm not all the limitations that I say, well, you know, I'm this and I'm that, and this is why it doesn't work, and that's why it doesn't work, right? If we die to all of those, who will we be? Who's left? It's a little scary. I don't have any excuses anymore. I don't have anything to lean on anymore. I simply we get to own ourselves as radiant and magnificent beings of love and light, who are showing up in the world to the best of our ability, right? To share that love and light through through this very vehicle of expression. So that is the metaphysical understanding of the resurrection. And we can stop there and see how that lands with you, how you take that up, any additions that you might have to it or questions about it. What might you be able to do with that story for yourself? So we're going to say hello to Ryan, and we do have a comment in the room when we're ready.
Awesome. Well, happy Easter to everybody here in the room and those all around the world. Happy Easter to you too. And we just appreciate you all being in community with us today. And I just want to acknowledge, me and Richard did not call each other beforehand. This is my pastel partner over here.
Definitely in Easter colors.
And for those online, let me paint the picture. He's in a salmon color polo, and I've got the baby powder blue, okay? It's Easter time, all right? So I just want to acknowledge our fashion sense for today. Thank you very much, everybody. And aside from that, I didn't mean to steal the show, but we do offer this as an engaging experience, and so we do encourage you guys to participate. And the way that you do that is, for those who are here in the room, you can just wave your arm around, flail it about, stand up, jump up and down, and myself or the iconic Richard will pass off the microphone. And we always encourage volunteerism here at CSLDallas, so if you have the microphone and you see somebody else, feel free to hand it off to them as well too. And for those who are joining us in the Zoom room, it's super easy and simple for you to participate. You just have to hit the raise your hand icon located down below, or you can always put your questions and comments inside of the chat, and I can bring those into the room as well. And for everyone all over the ethernets of the internet, you can also put your questions and comments inside of the Facebook Live chat, and we can bring those into the room too. And I always like to mention I keep the chats anonymous, so that way we can continue to have a safe container of spiritual growth. So I know we have somebody here in the room. If you want to go ahead and just say your name and just ask your question.
Good morning, I'm Shauna. Blessed Easter. That was an amazing teaching moment. Your light is just shining amazingly. And I just wanted to say amen, and so it is.
Other thoughts, comments, questions, additions?
Well, I do, yeah. We have somebody here in the room, and then we got one online.
Perfect. Great.
Hi, I'm Cindy. Today is like the 12th anniversary of when I showed up here on Easter Sunday. And I was in the dark night of the soul that you referred to when I came just seeking, what was I here for? And over the time that I've been here and the journey I've been on, I just loved how you place that into the resurrection, because that's exactly how I feel my life has evolved. I was so closed off when I got here. I didn't know where I was going. And, I, one step at a time, took classes and learned and evolved. And now I feel just completely free and not closed off, and having, expressed who I am that I'd hidden for so long. So I just loved this talk. It just really represented the journey I've had.
Thank you. Thank you, Cindy. Thanks for sharing that. Super awesome. Do you want to just grab that and we'll pass it back? And I love that. And knowing your walk over the last 12 years, it has not always been easy, right? Lots and lots and lots of challenges along the way. And that's a part of the crucifixion process and the being in the tomb. It's not a long, steady uphill climb into nirvana. Spiritual growth is, well, I was going to say a whole bunch of words, but you can fill in the blank, right? And it's challenging, and to wake up is a process, right? And yet, what's at the other end of that is the freedom to be who we are, and to express our lives as fully as we can, and to be the light, right? And you are that. And Cindy's become a practitioner in those 12 years. And yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Good. Yeah.
Yeah, so the question is a little long, so I'm going to abbreviate it here.
Okay.
But the sum of it is, how would you describe from a metaphysical perspective the part of the story where Jesus is betrayed by Judas?
Mm-hmm. Well, have we never betrayed ourselves? Did something, and it doesn't even have to be an underhanded bad thing, right? But betrayed our truth to protect ourselves, betrayed our light to not be ostracized by people that we love, betrayed our deepest values because it was more convenient to be complacent. There's so many ways in which we betray ourselves. And especially with there's two parts of that story. The first one is there's a lot of contemplation of who Judas might have been in the realm of facts of the story. And there is some sense that he was what was considered one of the sects of Judaism at the time, which were the Zealots, and which is where we get that term zealot. So there were four sects: the let's start. The Pharisees were the ones Jesus railed against the most. They were sort of the ordinary people practicing Judaism who liked to be very pious, and they wanted you to know how pious they were, right? So that's why he railed against, praying from the street corners and having people see how pious you are. Go into your closet, for God's sakes. We don't have to see it. We don't have to know it. Right, and the Sadducees were the temple priests, and that was sort of, when God is in the temple and the Jews have followed all 714 laws in a single day. All the Jews follow all 714 laws in a single day. God will return to Jerusalem, and all will be right with the world. And so very law-based and temple-based. And we had the Essenes, who were essentially the Gnostics, who were the desert fathers. They lived in the communes out in the desert, in the communities. That's where we cut the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Nag Hammadi Library all comes from their keeping all of their books and preserving them. And there's a lot of speculation that Jesus actually spent some time with the Essenes. And then we have the Zealots. The Zealots believed that the Messiah, who was going to be in the line of David, would come back as a king and would come back as an imperial king. He would come back he would emerge as a king for the Hebrews and restore the actual kingdom. Restore the actual power of the political kingdom, and so then again, and when what happens when church and state get married? And it's usually about power and money, isn't it? Power and greed, and so the representation of that, of course, is the gold, the 30 or the silver, the 30 pieces of silver. And even in our own lives, have we not occasionally betrayed ourselves in service to being able to pay our bills, being able to find a way to have more power or more efficacy? Have we ever not spoken up at a place of work because we were afraid we might lose our job? Right, and then we make that into bigger and bigger, not just our own personal lives and our own job, but now just think of the people that were just expelled from the Tennessee legislature for speaking truth, and and you can just see that, right? And so when we're talking about mythology, all of the characters are us. They're all us. They're all parts of us. And so, and when have we compromised ourselves? And sometimes it's hard not to do that, right? Sometimes it's hard not to do that, not to compromise ourselves, or not to make choices that aren't the highest and best all the time. And so, to have compassion, right? What did Jesus say? I forgive you. Even before it took place, I forgive you, right? And we have to forgive those parts of ourselves. The crucifixion and the death does not have to be a angry one. It doesn't. It doesn't have to be an angry one. It just has to be a no. No, this is not who I am. No, this is not my truth. No, this is not how I choose to behave. No, this is not how I choose to think. No, I will not allow these false beliefs to run me. No, I won't be afraid. No. This is who I am. This is the spiritual truth. This is how I choose to show up. This is who I expect myself to be. I will act from love. I will work on being peaceful. I will speak my anger and my upset, but I will do it with dignity and appropriately. I will say the truth. Do you see and it's not always easy. And so we have to be compassionate with ourselves and with each other in that as well. So thanks, Ryan. It was a great question.
I know. I wanted to put a plot twist in that story. We're going to go ahead and go to Brenda. Brenda, do you want to unmute yourself and just say hello?
Good morning, Brenda.
Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Petra and community. I have to say this is the most enlightening, awesome presentation of the Easter story that I've had, and I echo the previous sentiments of how you pull all of your knowledge. So, pulling from this last discussion and your knowledge, let's take away the judgment of betrayal and go to the Gospel of the Gospel of Judas. And in the Gospel of Judas, Judas describes himself as Jesus's best and closest friend who had the courage and strength to do what was necessary when Jesus became weak or afraid or might falter and was necessary to complete the story. And I think of that as when I'm facing that wall and not sure I have that strength when I call my prayer partner or practitioner. And this idea of betrayal comes from those who wrote the story, but if we take out the anger, then is it an act of compassion for those who love us, say, perhaps to help us die, perhaps to be the mirror in our face and give us that tough love we don't want to hear about stripping away the truth of who we are. So I just love your comments on that, please.
Yes, lovely, right? And see, that's the lovely thing about myth is that there's always more than one way to take it up. There's always more truth to be revealed. And so that is, again, another lovely way of speaking about it. I love Kuan Yin from the Buddhist tradition. She's considered the female Buddha. And she is the Buddha of compassion. And normally, in most cases, she's portrayed as either sitting or standing with a lotus, and she has either a hand out with a lotus or she's in some very peaceful repose. But there's also a representation of Kuan Yin, which is my favorite one, where she has the lotus in one hand and the sword of compassion in the other. And the sword of compassion is her willingness to cut away the false beliefs, to not co-sign on our bullshit about who we think we are and all the ways that we stand in our own way. And it is the sword of compassion. And we sometimes go, what? But to speak truth, and to speak truth to ourselves and those we love, and to say, no, that's not who I know you to be, or to be willing to tell the truth when somebody maybe doesn't want to hear it, when what they want from us is empathy and compassion, and we want to say, but I know that this is not your truth. I think that is a powerful opportunity for us to really look at this as well. And that also goes back to sort of the physical idea or the factual idea that Judas was a zealot. There was also some thought that he believed that if he precipitated this, that it would force Jesus to show his hand, right? And that he would then take his place as the king. And in terms of the story as we know it from the Christian point of view, of course, what he was evidencing is that he was king from a spiritual point of view, not from a material point of view. And of course, what we know is that those go together, right? Those go together. Ryan.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Okay, Connie, would you like to go ahead and unmute yourself and join us?
Good morning, Connie.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. A spiritual practice that I've been practicing. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. We've got a little bit something going on, but go ahead.
Okay. Is that if somebody gets triggered at me or lashes out at me, and it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes it happens, what I'm doing now is saying, that's not about me. And then I come forth with, it's about how that person is communicating. Whether they choose it or not, Rob Bright told me if a person gets triggered, they don't choose it, they just, and it just comes out automatically. But anyway, I just say that's how that person is communicating, and then compassion flows to that person instead of lashing back. And it's so good, so good. And then another thing that's happening in my spiritual growth is, and I think I've told you all this before, but my intuition is getting stronger and stronger. I'm just going with the flow. Yeah.
Beautiful. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that, Connie. That's awesome. And of course, the other side of that coin is to pay attention to when we are lashing out ourselves. And to recognize that sometimes we think somebody is being triggered, and actually what they're doing is telling us a truth we don't want to hear. So we want to be very careful about that. We want to be very careful about how we, so we always have to ask ourselves, what's in this for me? What is in this for me? And it could be a practice of peace, and it could be that there is some information that we need to be hearing that we just don't want to hear. So the more awake we can be, the better. It's beautiful, right? And to continually seek to be as present as possible with what's going on. And when we go to sleep, when we go on automatic pilot, to recognize it, to notice it, and then to wake back up again to the best of our ability. All right. Anything else wants to be said or shared or talked about before we got one more comment back here?
All right, if you'd like to go ahead and just tell us your name and...
I'm Shauna again.
Hi, Shauna.
I was thinking about your analogies of the resurrection and him being present with somebody. And I was present with somebody this weekend who is very, very dear to me. That was betrayed. And he was betrayed the day I flew in. And I think this person is very dear to me, and my limiting belief or my limiting behavior is sometimes when I see people in deep pain, I want to help, quote unquote. And this time, for some reason, probably because I've been practicing this a lot, I was able to just keep seeing his wonderfulness, even in the midst of his pain. And I could keep seeing his light in the midst of his pain. And so I just sat with him in his pain. And I was just present. And I didn't try to fix it, or I didn't try to make him feel better. And we just journeyed together. And then yesterday morning, he woke up again to his magnificence. Yeah. And listening to you makes me realize that he had traveled his own resurrection. Yes. And I hadn't thought about it in those terms, so thank you.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Shauna. Right? And every one of us has to go into the tomb ourselves. Nobody can do it for us. Right? Nobody can do it for us. And so, but to hold that container, to be that space, and not to, we want so badly for people not to hurt, but usually it's because we don't want to hurt. We don't want to feel the pain that they're feeling. And if we can be the light, not to minimize the pain, right, but to just be the light, we can travel with people through that. Absolutely. I love the way that you said that. Good for you.
Thank you for helping me.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So we're all on the journey, right? We understand Jesus to be the way shower, an example of someone who seems to have been as closely and deeply connected and as fully aware of that as anybody that we know or have read about in the West. And so we take it not as a commandment, but as an invitation to a deeper dive into our spiritual truth and into who we truly are. And a recognition that the road can be challenging. This is why we're in community. right? This is why we're in community together. So when the road is challenging, we have each other. We have each other to hold each other's hand, pick each other up, remind each other of spiritual truth, keep each other going, right, as we walk the road. And I don't know about you, but my life has had a series of resurrections, a series of tombs, and a series of, awakenings. And I think that's as it should be. So we hope that you have a beautiful and joyous Easter. We do have a lovely, really powerful celebration coming up here in the next 30 minutes. So please do join us as you can. Otherwise, have a fabulous day, a fabulous week, and we will see you very soon. Bye for now.